Ladies and gentlemen, so we will now move to the first round table of this morning. And this round table will be dedicated on the military navies and the maritime issues, conflicts at sea, especially in this sensitive area that we've been talking about for a day and a half now. And so the admirals who are with me are not analysts or experts. They're people involved in operations. They have the responsibility and take charge of managing their navies to prepare for the future crisis and wars. We've used these words several occasions since yesterday, talking about that will, of course, concern the men and women, submarines, planes, aircrafts, and ships and vessels. So in front of me, I have Admiral Nicolas Vaujour, who is the Chief of Staff of the French National Navy. To his left, Vice Admiral Squadron Admiral Martinez Merrio y Diaz of the Spanish Navy. Admiral Vincenzo Montarano, who is the Chief of Staff of the Italian Logistic Command, in charge of the logistics of the Italian Navy. And Rear Admiral Ayman Abel Abdas El Dali, who is the commander of the Egyptian South Fleet. So the Mediterranean, historically, of course, is a sea that was very big with trade, exchanges, plays an important role in trade. More than 80% of the world trade is done by ships, by vessels, and 25% of the world trade goes via the Mediterranean. 30% of the petrochemical products and energy flows towards the EU. So it's obviously, there's a major stake for European economy, and not only for Europe, but countries of the south of Europe and for the world. 10% of the traffic, maritime traffic, world traffic, uses the Red Sea and the Mediterranean. And Suez Canal, I'm sorry. A military standpoint, the Mediterranean is a deployment platform close to the main zones. So there are two aircraft carriers, U.S. aircraft carriers that were deployed off the coast of the Middle East, the Near East, clearly show what the Mediterranean can bring and how the Mediterranean Sea is used militarily for dissuasion actions and action or operations. So the Mediterranean, maybe next year we will propose maps. Each time we talk about a zone, it will be simpler for everybody. But the Mediterranean, is an access or a passage to the two main oceans, Indian Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean, because this sea is locked up between those two oceans. But it provides access for a lot of locked-in countries, giving access to Gibraltar and the Suez Canal to the Indian Ocean and Atlantic Ocean. There's a characteristic also, while describing this landscape, a strong characteristic that we will mention during this panel, which are the increasing capacities, strike capacities from the sea or from land to the sea, make the sea that's not very big, in fact, virtually smaller than it was. And thus it brings the tensions closer together than what we knew in the past. So in a way, what concerns the Eastern Mediterranean now concerns the Western Mediterranean countries much more than it was the case 20 or 30 years ago. So this sea could become a kind of ring, a boxing ring, quite uncomfortable for the navies or riparian states that are mutually more vulnerable than they were in the past. So once this said, the question I ask the panelists is how they integrate their respective navies in this context. What is their role? How they envisage development? What are the main stakes and challenges? So I'll hand over the floor to Admiral Vaugeot. So thank you very much for inviting me to this round table. I will go over the description of the midterm with adding a few elements, even if it was really well done. It's a cradle of our civilization. If you look at all the countries represented here around this table, whether the southern part of the Mediterranean or antique Greece, or the Mediterranean developed itself around its ports, around its trade activities, exchanges, whether commercial or traffic, whether illicit or licit. But it's truly the cradle. It's Mare Nostrum, we call it. And for the National Navy, here it's one of the biggest ports, the port of Toulon, where you have frigates, you have aircraft carrier, projection vessels, and patrol vessels, and so on and so forth. Go back on the map. It's always the same. We like maps, us sailors, and it's a sea that's practically locked in. You talked about two axes, but I will add a third. It's the Bosphorus. And in the wheat crisis that we faced recently between Ukraine and the countries of the south, this access to the Mediterranean became essential. Is essential. Essential access, of course, Suez and Gibraltar. So in the end, this sea is quite small. When you look at the immensity of the oceans, it's 8% of the sea space in the world. So the Mediterranean is not much. And there's another statistic that's interesting in terms of water volumes. If you take all the ocean volumes, the Mediterranean represents only 0.3% of the total water volume. So, but these three axes are essential for the world trade. 25% of the maritime and 65% of the energy flows for Europe. So obviously for me, securing these stakes to the benefit of our country, to the benefit of Europe, generally speaking, is of prime importance, essential. So these stakes, we talked about with trade, there's a place of communication, not only because we exchange from one country to the other, but simply because in Marseille you have 14 underwater cables that are connected to Marseille, representing a good half of the internet connectivity of Europe today. 14 major cables, and Marseille has become the first leading internet hub of Europe today. In terms of energy resources, the gas reserves that were discovered recently represent several thousands of billions of cubic meters that were discovered in 2010, with as much impatience and as much will on behalf of some countries to exploit these reserves. So these are very high environmental stakes, fishing stakes. We know the problems with the fisheries, fishing red tuna, for example, which was deregulated because now we managed to reproduce the resource. But it's a potential friction around these environmental stakes. And lastly, you have the demographic stakes with a strong disparity between the south and the north of the Mediterranean, giving rise to transfers and migration movements and a lot of human dramas that we try to contain with countries that are in the forefront faced with the management of all these issues. So my first mission as the Chief of Staff of the Navy to protect our territory, to participate to the protection of Europe, I work on a daily basis in the Mediterranean to reduce the risks and to protect our citizens from all these threats, protect the commercial flows that fuel our economy, and protect our populations against the threats. The Mediterranean is a place of shift, I would call it. It was repeated this morning by Mrs. Loiseau, the dynamic of the strengths that takeover law are at work today, not only in Ukraine. The force that fights the law is present also today in the Mediterranean also. So the force, the strength relationship gives rise to something that's quite marking for us military. For 20 years now, we've selected our operations. When we decided to war against terrorism, we chose to help, to support a certain number of countries to fight against terrorism, whether in the Middle East, in Sahel, or we selected our engagements. But today there's a shift, there's a change, where our engagements are no longer selected or chosen, but imposed. We have to face new grounds of operations, change the state of mind. You were prepared to something you anticipated and chose. You have to be prepared now to something you haven't chosen, and something you haven't anticipated and probably will be much more brutal. And so these commitments, tougher, I would say, commitments, well, we need to be prepared to face them. Second characteristic of this shift is things are moving extremely fast. If you look at the tempo at which the world is evolving, there's a kind of acceleration, gaining momentum, which leads to the fact the first question that comes to mind as a chief of staff is, am I ready if today we have a strong degradation, if tomorrow we have to sail? There's a kind of urgency as person responsible for the Navy to make sure that we did everything we could through our organization, but also with all our allies to be sure that we're ready to wage war with a view to this acceleration of the disorders. And it's urgent to the point where it was said earlier is we are witnessing rearmament, naval armament. It's true everywhere in the world, but especially in the Mediterranean, in this locked-in area, we see the different threats to which we can be faced. The cyber threat, we talked about underwater cables, the disinformation we talked about this morning, the threat of satellite observations over the naval forces, the hypervelocity, because there are a lot around the Mediterranean of missiles, high velocity missiles, how we deal with them, and the Mediterranean as a place of deployment. You mentioned that earlier. I was asking my control command to compare two maps. Unfortunately, I can't show them here because I can't reveal these secrets, but between what was deployed in June last year in maritime forces and Navy forces and what's deployed today, the comparison, it's absolutely colossal. The difference, it's 5 and 10 times more. And so the deployment platform the Mediterranean represents is something impressive today. And so in this vast rearmament trend, there's a real question, that is instability. In reality, when you look, when you listen, when you heard Mrs. Loiseau, you went from a point of stability following the Second World War as a caricature with a respected world order. Today, there's a world order that is avoided, that is circumvented with a transition. As submarine operators talk about a transition movement. We move from one state to another, so the period of transition, everything can happen. Everything's much more dangerous. And the issue for us today is that we're aware of being in this period of instability, but we don't know what we're heading for, what other stability we're heading for. So that's a real issue, because when you know if what you want to come back to, but really, will we go back to the international order we knew before? Absolutely not certain. It's a real question. What is the next point of instability? And in this transition period, what are the main characteristics a Navy should have to respond to the operational needs that are set to it? First of all, protecting its citizens, protecting Europe, in the broader sense of the word, protecting our stakes and our economy. The second characteristic, capacity to adapt, and agility also. So these two key qualities that we expect from military forces, and notably from the Navy, especially in the Mediterranean. And so for me, it's faced with this pessimistic stock. I think that what's at stake is to provide the means that can contain, limit this destabilization. For this, I have three major operation lines for the Navy. First of all, is being better prepared to combat, to fight, contain and interoperability, of course, which is I will develop, to be better prepared. Well, first of all, the engagements we will have in the future will be tougher, more brutal, and imposed on us. So the panel of missions we should be prepared to is broader. The second reason is that, in fact, sailors, seamen are sentinels of crisis. So we are at the closest to the crisis. We deploy, we have vessels and ships that are very close to what's happening in Israel in Eastern Mediterranean. We can observe the development of a crisis from much closer, even if we can't access on the ground. Our capacity to observe, to see what's happening is absolutely essential. But it bears a very important risk, is that the shift can be very quick. Today, the National Navy is in everyday contact with Russian units because the Russian Navy is in the Mediterranean. And so the difference between nothing's happening and a big incident can degenerate is a question of seconds. It's a question of orders, command, on the Russian side and on the French side. We are on a daily contact with our competitors, and so we need to be ready for any change or shift. So how do we prepare for that? Well, we strengthen our operational preparation, high intensity preparation, and we are not alone in this preparation process. We tried to get it to work, and here around the round table we have the key people we work with on a daily basis. And next year in April, we will carry out a full-fledged exercise with the Italian Navy. Maritime is their major exercise. And in France, it's Polaris. And we decided in common with the Chief of Staff of the Italian Navy to do it together at the south of Toulon, to prepare together, be better prepared. Absolutely essential. To harden our preparation. And the second thing is, faced with the overspill of powers in this renewal of the strategic dialogue, if we should talk about a strategic dialogue, we have what's happening today in the Eastern Mediterranean. In fact, like you said, Pascal, the arrival of the aircraft carriers, U.S. aircraft carriers, helps us understand how the U.S. wants to contain the crisis. If you look back, not that far, the declaration of Vladimir Putin around the use of the nuclear weapons is also a strategic dialogue. So this renewal of this dialogue is essential. Maybe it had been set aside, but today the navies, the maritime forces, are part of the options to respond, to send messages to the different warlords and face the different crises. When the Tonnerre sails, it's a good sign to show that France wants to propose its assistance to the resolution of the crisis. So the strategic movements need to be mastered. It's essential and something that we work on a daily basis so that we can discourage a competitor to move further. That's what containing an overspill is, to be adaptable, to be reactive, capable of engaging your forces so that the competitor before you contains its actions. And that's what our Chief of Staff means when he says win the war before the war. So you have to be positioned rapidly to contain these overspills of powers. Nevertheless, you have to know where you want to go and recover this point of balance. And that's why I like to thank the FMES for this organization of the RS Meds, because that's how together through a dialogue that we can put on the table a certain number of things and try to find together to strike the balance. We're not politicians in charge of decision-making processes, but contributing is essential. I'm convinced, and that'll be my third point, is that this balance should be struck in common through a dialogue with the partners, through the dialogue with even with people we don't agree with, we don't get along with, because it's through a dialogue that we understand each other. And that's how we find the different options. If we can't find grounds of agreement, it doesn't work. And the dialogue should take us to better work together. I talked about interoperability earlier. Interoperability, we often understand it through communications, but interoperability, in fact, is three things. Be able to establish a dialogue. The second is to be able to work together with different procedures, that we work together, through exercises. Well, the people around this table, we work every day on these exercises. But the third point, which is the most important, is trust. Trust between two countries, a trust between two military leaders is essential. And my objective with the chief of staffs of the navies around the Mediterranean is that we get to know each other to the point where we have a problem, we can call each other. We can give each other a call, say, okay, what do you do? Is it good, bad? To better understand what's happening, better analyze the situation. Be on a conversation basis, and trust is essential if we want to work together. Today there are a lot of examples of exercises we carried out, but the MEX, the last example, 9 nations and 2,800 soldiers that were brought on the Mediterranean. It's a step forward in the interoperability and the better understanding of our friends and allies. It's essential. We have exercises with Morocco that I'd like to pay tribute to, with Egypt, Italy, Spain, that are here around this table. It's absolutely essential. So I don't want to go further because the Mediterranean is a passion for me, but I will answer your questions if after this. But key of success starts here. We didn't wait for the RS Meds to establish a dialogue between the different navies, but we're at a very peculiar moment of history. This crystallization of the tensions, this shift, this acceleration of disorder towards a new balance that doesn't exist, not yet defined. So it's of course gives rise to anxiety. We're there to contain, to observe what's happening, to ensure that we adapt. The faster you adapt, the more chances you have of winning. But those who adapt understand better, and so they can position themselves better. So it's winning the war before the war. And I think that what's interesting in this peculiar moment is that we couldn't imagine what's happening today. And what I asked my troops today is to fight against, concluding punchline, if you want, is to fight against the deny of mental access. We forbidden ourselves from reflecting, from thinking about a lot of things. And now all the red lights are on. We really have to fight against a denial of mental access that we had, on thinking that there would be an internal peace, contained crisis. And now we have to think of what can really happen and think of the consequences. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you. Well, Admiral, on the Spanish side, what are your views? First, I would like to thank the French Navy and the FMES for this invitation, for discussion, and we talk, covering from the Persian Gulf to the Atlantic Ocean. Back to what the French Navy Chief of Staff said, the future is always full of surprises. We have to be aware of that. But I will start from an analysis of the area, and then I will answer your question. Of course, as you said, It is well known that about 90% of world trade goes through international maritime routes. So it has to be safe so that the global trade will function. And in a globalized world, the security of maritime routes cannot be segmented, and any incident somewhere will have a negative impact on other players or other geographical zones. The maritime routes between the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Gibraltar faces several risks and threats of various nature throughout the geographical space. It is a long route where 4 of the 6 important points of passage in the world are there: the Strait of Hormuz, Aden, Suez, and the Gibraltar Strait. Strait of Gibraltar, you have to add the Gulf of Aden and the Red Sea, where risk and threats are multiple. And you said it is the main route from hydrocarbons to Europe, and it is used by most of the general bulk or container transport coming from Asian countries to Europe. Moreover, this route covers about a quarter of the world circumference, as it goes from 15 west to 70 east and from the equator to 40 north. So therefore, it is located on the separation line between various different worlds. First, a economic separation between Europe and Africa, or between the Iberic Peninsula and Africa, and also a religious separation between Christianism and Islam, or between the Sunnite and Shiite, and even the presence of Israel with the Jewish world. Therefore, we're dealing with a route on the line of fracture, which always experiences almost seismic shocks. And we need to analyze the presence of major powers which take advantage of the confrontation of this hybrid or gray zone and trying to solve their conflicts in an indirect manner by reinforcing their presence in the region and the alliance that stem from that. I'm talking about Russia in Syria, in Sudan, in Libya, or in Sub-Sahara, as well as China along the strip from the Horn of Africa to the Atlantic coast, not forgetting Israel, the U.S. in Israel, in the Persian Gulf, or in Mediterranean Europe. And remember that this goes along 2 continents facing huge difficulties, but different in nature, source of major instability and concerns for world peace. Africa, you know, a continent that faces so many difficulties, which has natural wealth, but we do not always profit to the inhabitants, but they actually have negative impact on the population. Sub-Sahara demographic pressure, which reaches the European coastline, Greece and Italy. But we should mention also different states: Sudan, Eritrea, Ethiopia, or the 2 Libyas. Now, if we look at the Middle East subcontinent, well, we see a fight for supremacy in the Muslim world between Saudi Arabia and Iran, and between the anti-Muslim world and the very existence of the State of Israel. I don't want to conclude this survey without talking about the Oriental Mediterranean and the influence of Turkey and Russia. Turkey has a moderated Islam associated with its economic development, which makes it possible to have a sort of a neo-Ottoman trend, which is a reference for many Muslim countries. Turkey has border problem with Greece, especially for small islands on the Aegean Sea, which remain at the level of local tension because they are both members of NATO. Now, as the ambition of Russia to restore this zone of influence in Eastern Mediterranean with its energetic potential and military might, it is expressed by the invasion of Ukraine, and also on the pressure it puts on countries which buy its oil and petrol. Well, Russia has good political relations with Syria, to which it supplies weapons. In the last few years, it took advantage of the economic and political growing pressure on Iran to reinforce its influence and to tighten links with Iran. with Iran. This increases the tension of relationship with NATO, the European Union, and countries such as the US, Turkey, or Israel. These dynamics could become source of risk and threats. We should add, a global dynamics, which is the threats in many domains. The threats and menaces are not limited to maritime routes. You know, we talked, this happens in other domains, air, space, land. We cannot accept just the maritime dimension of the threats because most of them actually have a hybrid origin. And those who try to jeopardize the security of that route will use non-conventional weapons, non-conventional weapons, cyber attacks, disinformation, and the monitoring control. Therefore, we have to consider the utilization of UAVs, against ships, port installation, and logistic facilities. And there could be also cyber attacks in the control command systems and the degradation of GPS systems, Galileo or GPS. Likewise, it will not be difficult to have to sustain attacks in information systems, affecting our ability to understand reality and therefore impacting our decision-making process. And let's not forget the threats that exist on the undersea cables and for data flow in the seabed, especially along the key points. So having completed this list of risks and threats, so what measures should we take? We need to understand that the maritime domain is continuous and any problem is connected and will affect us in different ways. Any problem anywhere, be it at the political, economic, social level. It is essential to understand the next step and to be aware of the impact of the frictions and the scenarios that are taking place. Well, everything is interconnected, not just in terms of geography, but also in the domains, and certainly the seabed, which should soon be a zone of conflicts as well, or source of conflicts. Nations which have an influence along this route between the Persian Gulf and the Mediterranean should be able to improve and increase their presence in the zones of interest as member of an international security organization, NATO, Combined Maritime Forces, African Union, NATO, or through joint initiative between nations. This increase of presence should come up with a reinforcement of the sharing of information and data that will make it possible to have a better defense of our interest. But today, we need to have the superiority of information, that is to understand what goes on, and from that, we must be able to protect the information as well as the decision-making processes. Once this is done, we must be able to influence the decision-making process from the other players in order to shape the battle cognitive space in our favor. We must have networks and information sharing systems that will make it possible to guarantee the systematic processing of data, of information knowledge, and which will contribute to reach the superiority of decision-making process in operations. It is essential to invest and to train to the use of means against the unmanned system, because they could be used by those who wish to compromise the safety of navigation along this route. And this utilization of UAV in Ukraine show that this could be used by criminal organizations in the future. Another fundamental aspect, in my opinion, is the participation to operation which is sponsored by organizations such as Spain does, as a permanent member of NATO in the region, or also for strategic position in the Red Sea, in the Horn of Africa, in the Indian Ocean. To take part in this operation brings in value in terms of visibility, communication strategy, and influence in the region, including cooperation with coastal states or riparian states, and we can increase the efficacy of the missions. I cannot ignore the presence in the Gulf of Guinea. Clearly, this is not part of the program of this roundtable but as I said already, by analyzing the route, what happens in sub-Saharan Africa will always impact the Mediterranean coast. Without trying to operationalize the zone, which should be avoided because we don't want to upset the sensitivities of riparian states, we must create a forum of exchange between Spain, France, Italy, Portugal, I'll take them in alphabetical order, to coordinate our presence and have continuous visibility in the Gulf of Guinea throughout the year. When it comes to the Israeli conflict, we have to wait to see evolution. So we will work with the European Union for Spain. We will maintain control of potential application involvements of former players. And we don't want the conflict to become international because we don't want a larger conflict to impact the safety of the Mediterranean zone as a whole. Thus, I consider very useful the contribution of European navies to the reinforced capacity building in several countries along the maritime route to ensure procedures that will increase the maritime security level. Thanks to the participation of the countries, we could build a maritime security architecture with a warning system informing the Mediterranean community about new incidents and the advent or modification of new challenges, risks, or threats. The creation of maritime coordination centers in those countries is an example to reinforce cohesion between the contributing countries for having a safer maritime route. We should insist on the efforts of Egypt to ensure safety in the north part of the Red Sea, in the Suez Canal, and of its access. So all those initiatives should include a better integration of the maritime activity and fishing. So these fleets play a key role, and it is essential to be able to improve the knowledge of maritime environments. So we'll have a symbiosis in which we could better understand the movement and their vulnerability, while providing information on risk and as well as advices and protection. Finally, we have to insist on the protection of the environment because, in my opinion, sea security means that we should pay attention to the environment in the medium term. This protection is fully linked to the future of fishery and prosperity of one of the largest sources of income in this sea route going from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean, that is tourism. The two domains, fishing and tourism, are key goals for the social and economic development of the riparian countries are being treated in the marine environment is not preserved today. We must raise the awareness of the population to the importance of marine conservation to reduce the outspill and promote the defense of the environment. Therefore, we should have regional agreement to ensure fight against sea pollution from the coast and from the ships which navigate along the coasts. Investment in scientific research is a major contribution to the study of the impact of pollution on the ecosystem and its relation with human health. By way of conclusion, I would like to insist on the zone of major interest for Spain, the bottleneck where stops the Strait of Gibraltar and which go beyond the Canary Islands. We are thinking about a critical strategic area associated with various threats and menaces and risk and threats. Some are common to the route and others are specific to this zone. Specific zone, first there is illegal immigration and drug trafficking. This zone is the last barrier to Europe for a huge number of human beings pushing pushed away from their countries, but also from drug traffic smugglers from Central and South America. There is a major challenge in terms of security and human. A large part of the solution to such activities resides in Morocco, and Spain has a good coordination to find a global solution to the problem by involving all public administrations. To deal with this risk and threats, we go have naval forces along the route, and more specifically in locations where we consider are more threatened. And we do ensure safety with our allied countries, because multilateral cooperation is the only way to ensure maritime or naval security of this common space. Thank you, Admiral.
First of all, I would like to present the greetings to you, sir, and to you, of course, of the Chief of Italian Navy, Admiral Crendino, who was unable to come today for conflicting ministerial commitment. And on behalf of the Navy, I also would like to thank la Fondation Méditerranée des Études Stratégiques, I'm finished with my French, and for organizing this event, which allows, of course, an exchange of knowledge, perspectives, and maybe also of solutions. And as was said yesterday, increases for sure the networking. Now, just coming back to the team, I would like to start with the importance of the sea. It has been said, 90% of the traffic, 99% of the cables for the communications, especially we have to consider that the traffic by sea is less polluting than the traffic by road, 5 times, by railway, 3 times. And additionally, as we heard, we have a 65 of energy flow for Europe, considering that the Mediterranean Sea is just 1% of the global water surface. Now, Italy is interested in not an exclusive way in the so-called wider Mediterranean. It's a geopolitical, geostrategic concept. It is basically a stretch of the Mediterranean Sea, which arrives where national interests are. So basically, we are talking about an area which starts from the Indo-Pacific, goes to the Red Sea, and then Horn of Africa, Mediterranean, and arrive to the Gulf of Guinea, up to the Arctic. And the thing is that Italy is basically at the crossroads of 2 main axes. One is east-west, which is the traffic of the goods, and the other one is north-south, which is the migration. It is also the energy flow. Now, if you want to speak clear, we have to admit maybe one thing. The paradigm at sea has changed. We shifted from peace, crisis, war to competition, crisis, war. So the starting point was the competition. Different point of view, different perspective, political, military, economic, social, infrastructure. And if we add to this some, let's say, issues or threats, first of all, the territorialization and the lawfare at sea. Consider that there are 21 countries facing the Mediterranean, and less than 20% of the Mediterranean is free from disputes and from claims, because there are a lot of coastal states which use a sort of a preemption from some sketches of the sea. Additionally to this, there is the war in Ukraine, the fighting on in Gaza Strip, and as it was said, the Mediterranean Sea starts becoming very small. Also because there are a lot of navies present there. There was, of course, an increasing of the presence of relationship. But we also have to think about the positioning of a Chinese relationship all around Africa, which could affect also our capability to exploit the sea. That's what we are trying to let also the population understand in order to fight the sea blindness, which is the other problem. To let understand how to be a maritime country is important. Sometimes 80,000 kilometers of coastline are not sufficient to let the population understand how important is the sea, how important it is to be a nation with a strong maritime connotation. Now, the role of the Navy in this context is to provide by herself in concurrence with other navies the maritime security, which is basically based, according to our opinion, on three main pillars. The conduct of maritime operation, of course, the maritime situation awareness, so to understand clearly what is happening at sea, and the security cooperation or capacity building or, let's say, international cooperation. This is a new role, basically, that the navies have had in the last decade. Because, as a matter of fact, we need to be a means for the political decision maker to decide which option to employ, which means that we have to offer different options, which goes from the low end up to the high end, which means from the vigilance, the surveillance, up to the deterrence, but also the war fighting. And so the thing is, how to grant this? That's the point. For sure, training is quite important. The personnel is important as well. New ships, new capabilities, so we have to train the personnel, we have to train our ships working together with others. We changed our way of training with the exercise Mar Aperto, so you were talking about, with more realism, employing the Article 5. In the training of the Navy, in the last decades, we switched from the crisis response operation. It was always crisis response operation, non-Article 5, but now we have understood that we have to increase our capability to the war fighting, and that's where we are focusing our training. And of course, in addition to the training, we also are developing new program for our ship. Program which have to be balanced. Why balanced? So not completely shifted to the war fighting, because we have to grant to the politician different scale of options, as I said. Which means that right now we are investing on the carrier strike group capability, which will be IOC in 2024, and in the deep waters and seabed infrastructure, because we do believe that this is an issue, this will be an issue. There is only 20% of the depth sea which has been explored, 80% to be explored yet, and we do need a regulation. We do need to protect our critical infrastructure. If you consider that 99% of the communication travels by cables, and so we could imagine what happened should the cable be sabotaged. Moreover, as far as the ships are concerned, we are working on the amphibious capability and on the frigates, which are basically the base of our fleets. So we complete the FREM class and the PPA. And in addition to that, we will have new mine hunters by 2025. So in general terms, having that, our clear point is to grant the readiness. So it's not only a matter of participate to operation, we do this, I will talk about it later, but to grant a readiness, because the instability is basically the presence. And so the way is to have ships prepositioned in order to grant the national interest, ready to switch, like this, the mission side, which means also being prepared in terms of sustainability for a possible effort that has to come. And as our area of interest is the so-called wider Mediterranean, we are present right now in the Mediterranean Sea with the national operation like Mediterraneo Sicuro, Fondali Sicuro, which is a bottom survey because we control the pipelines from Libya to Sicily, Tunisia to Sicily, and from Albania to southeast of Italy, Puglia. And we are part of a NATO activity, Noble Shield, and in the Mediterranean Sea, Brilliant Shield in the Baltic Sea, and the Sea Guardian. And we are part of a European activity in the Horn of Africa with the Operation Atalanta, in the Strait of Hormuz with the French Operation Agenor, and we are also present in the Gulf of Guinea in order to protect national interests. And as I said, we are able to do this through a sort of a scheme of maneuver. So we have deployed the ships in different parts, ready to intervene where the situation requires, and ready also to change the mission, as I said before. We also do believe, in addition to the preparation and to the readiness, to the training, to the international cooperation and the capacity building, which means having a real bilateral or multilateral international relation with all the countries, acting in a paritative way in order to develop their capability, trying to let them achieve an own self-capability in order to react and to face all the threats that might be present in the ship. And inside we are part of the 5+5 initiative, which means the 5 states of the north with 5 states of the south in the Mediterranean, the Adrian Initiative, which is Adriatic and Ionian, and the ECGII, so the European Carrier Group Interoperability Initiative. It is also worth to note the progress that we did in the Carrier Strike Group cooperation with the French Navy, with the US Navy. So I was last year the commanding officer of the Italian Carrier Strike Group, and it was really a very good opportunity, not only to show the capability, to show the intent of the mission, but also to know each other and to work, to learn to work together. Because the point, and I'm finishing, I think I take the time, we have to consider one thing. I've listened about working together, international cooperation. The thing is, when you have the same end state, then the key for success are the interoperability, but also the interchangeability of our assets, because that will be the key word for success. Because we have to think about the sustainability, we have to think about our personnel, but we have to think about the way to work together and the possibility to employ a French ship or a Spanish ship inside an Italian carrier strike group and vice versa, because that's where we have to go in order to show the capability to work together, which tends the common intent. That's all on my side. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Admiral. So, to east, because we have Gibraltar, Central Mediterranean, and now Suez. And Admiral Abbas, what is the Egyptian point of view?
First, Admirals, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, and thank you for inviting me in this important roundtable. Let me first send the greetings of Vice Admiral Ashraf Atwa, Commander of the Egyptian Naval Forces, and his best wishes for all of you. Concerning our issue here, really the Mediterranean is a vital, important issue. It is serving a vital trade route connecting Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. However, it is also prone to various security threats, including tourism, piracy, smuggling, and illegal immigration. Let me first say historically until now, the Mediterranean Sea is considered as one of the most important maritime places in the world due to its effective role throughout history, as it transfers the civilizations and the religions to whole the world, and occupies a medium position linking east with west and north with south with its interests across the seas. And allow me to talk from a point of view that concerns Egypt. Of course, you know, Egypt has a special situation since it has the borders with both Mediterranean and Red Sea, having the Suez Canal connecting between them, which applies a route represents a very important role in terms of saving time and distance for maritime transport lines, whether commercial or military, where it connects the Arabian Gulf and the Indian Ocean and the Red Sea with the Mediterranean Sea and the Atlantic Ocean through the Suez Canal. This track is important for navigation and global trade, which increases its geostrategic importance. The Mediterranean Sea is considered more value politically than geographically, as it is not limited to the units that straddle directly on it, but goes beyond that to include the political units that are linked to its political, economic, socially, security, military. The geopolitical scope of the Mediterranean Sea is so wide that it can include the political map of whole the world, of its geopolitical characteristics that push it to the forefront in terms of geostrategic importance. This importance affects the countries bordering the Mediterranean Sea, as it considered the heart of a complex network of intersection of the interesting and goals of regional and global power. As a result, the history of Mediterranean Sea is considered as a practical summary and sincere mirror of the history of international relations based on the balance of forces between countries. The Mediterranean Sea region is pivotal and governing region in the global and regional system and the hotbed of political, economic, military, security, and ideological conflicts. The competition between global and regional powers has also led to a closer involvement for conflict between those forces in trying to control and be present in this area using the available tools from regional forces or functional groups. The escalation of the role of non-governmental organization and transnational tourist organization, especially between the countries of the region, has a negative impact on maritime security in the region. To face these challenges and threats, traffic and maritime presence are on the most important forms of Egyptian efforts to achieve sea security, where the naval units of the Egyptian Navy forces are deployed individually and also by cooperation with friendly navies to carry out the tasks like maritime traffic, supporting maritime counter-tourism, smuggling, illegal immigration work, providing humanitarian aid by sea, also joint training with friend navies, and enhancing joint military cooperation by using the naval forces of cooperating countries to reduce those threats. Furthermore, individual maritime countries have taken steps to improve their maritime security capabilities. They have increased patrols, invested in surveillance technologies, and neighboring states to share intelligence and coordinate efforts. These measures have resulted in some success including the interception of smuggling vessels and procession of pirates. However, more needs to be done to strengthen maritime security in the Mediterranean. This includes improving information sharing and coordinating among countries, investing in modern maritime surveillance system, training personnel on advanced security techniques, and supporting the development of the rule of law in coastal states. In conclusion, maritime security in the Mediterranean remains a complex and evolving challenge. The regional geographic, economic, and political factors contribute to various security threats. It requires a comprehensive and collaborative approach to ensure the safety of trade routes, protect human lives, and prevent crime and tourism. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Messieurs, vous avez tous...
Gentlemen, you've all underlined, highlighted. Okay, just wait for you to wear your headset for the translation. So you've all highlighted the important role your navies play during peacetime and crisis time to ensure the proper security of maritime traffic, economic activity, the security of your citizens in the context that we know today, and with all the complex situations we're faced with. But you've also highlighted the fact that we were in a zone that was at the fracture, at the rupture of worlds that are being more and more subject to tensions, north, south, east, west, and we talked about this in length yesterday. Admiral Vaujour clearly indicated that we are faced with a crucial moment for all the navies, is moving from a time of crisis to a time of war. That can be extremely brutal and changes what we're faced with in terms of vulnerability of maritime means that are deployed. More so, and that's where I want to get to, the technological means in terms of information, in terms of surveillance, tracking, destruction of strikes have considerably developed and proliferated, which leads to the fact that a bit everywhere in the Mediterranean you can be tracked, localized, and hit. It's true with drones on top, on the sea or undersea. It's true with missiles with longer and longer range. It's true with the diffusion of satellites that are everywhere, gives you precise locations of your vessels on the sea. True with also other technical means, and also the cyber means, where you have all kinds of attacks that are deployed. So my question is, how do you manage this vulnerability that always exists in the Mediterranean? It's always been a boxing ring, where wars are never long because you always end up finding your adversary. But this vulnerability that has been growing considerably, what does this mean for your navies? How do you face these? How do you face the threats? And what is the most sensitive points, in your opinion, in all I've said in terms of technological progress and threats? Admiral. Thank you. I think that, as you said, but maybe I'll use other words, my own words, we've lived for a long time with an air maritime superiority. That was a fact. Our tools, our ships, our vessels, our naval groups were capable in the end of guaranteeing kind of superiority with a view to the threats we're faced with. And we're quite comfortable. Now with the deployment of new threats, hypervelocity, the possibility of tracking people and vessels and equipment, we don't have this superiority. We have to conquer this superiority. To be able to regain this superiority, air maritime superiority, win a battle or impose a will, or you need to have the tools enabling that. And these, of course, in the French Navy, we have a aircraft carrier group, I call a bubble of hyper superiority that around the aircraft carrier frigates, and that strengthen your position and help to impose your military superiority. It shows that faced with all these threats, you have to increase your level of technology, increase your capacity to work together to maintain the superiority. Capacity of working together is extremely important. And the second point, I would like to say that I share what our Spanish colleague here said. The information superiority is also key today. I think one of the risks, a lot of questions on screen, but one of the risks we're faced with in the Mediterranean is the risk of mistaking, of misunderstandings of what's happening with your colleagues or neighbors, or the misinformation. So the tension, any slip, any mistake can lead to a disaster. So the capacity of mastering the information space, better understanding what's happening, better detecting, seeing further, and understanding the intention of the adversary is something critical, quite complex to master. And notably with technological fractures, the artificial intelligence, the capacity to deploy fake information by our competitors can give rise to this misunderstanding and eventually a drift. So it's the most sensitive point. So the most sensitive is a misunderstanding on what the adversary means. And so to be very careful. We have to make sure that we understand each other, because we can give rise to, we can provoke a crisis with misunderstandings. So I'd like to go back on what was said for us. In terms of means, we have the Navy air security. And so what the adversary will try is to refuse to accept the intervention of our means. For us, the big challenge is to be able to manage all the information our systems provide. So we have such an enormous quantity of data. We have to be able to decipher all this and see through the branches of the trees what is the truth, the reality. And so this is how AI can help. It's essential. The whole digital part is to be able to understand what is really taking place. Understand what the adversary wants and what he will do in real time. So that's, I think, is our main goal, because in the end, our means and principle are superior if we are capable of using them properly and readily.
Yes, I do agree with what has been said so far. There is a gap right now. We don't have the superiority maybe we had in the past, and because it was not wartime. But the thing is that we are concerned, for instance, about the ballistic missile defense, and we are, as Italian Navy, good enough with the air missile defense. We have fifth-generation aircraft, F-35, the Navy and the Air Force as well, which means that they provide a sort of coverage of a bubble. But the thing is that we do believe that the mitigation in this case are the capability, as I said before, to work together with the other navies. That's what we are doing in NATO also, activity in the Baltic Sea, what we do during the ballistic missile defense exercise. And that's where our program basically are going. And for sure, the base that we need to achieve is a common information superiority and the capability to exchange information in real time among all the stakeholders, because it's not so easy sometimes. Also right now, maybe different system, NATO system, European system, national system, is not so easy to achieve. And this could happen, the situation in which we should also react in an automatic way. And the more information we have, the better will be our common reaction. Also because, according to the capability that our navies now have, we are able maybe to just cover one part of the capability, leaving another navy, another ship to do another thing. And for sure, we are investing also in the artificial intelligence with new ships, because they can manage the situational awareness in the maritime environment.
And for you, sir?
Yes, for Egypt, we are looking forward to improve our abilities in the high technology abilities and like drones, artificial intelligence, so that it be compatible with other friend navies, and we can work together to share the informations. We are working in that. Also, we are training and learning how to get the most benefit of our units when it is patrol in the theater, and how to use the theater very well to improve our capabilities with our abilities. Also, we are looking forward, and we are making efforts to get a good cooperation with the friend navies, to exchange information and to build the trust and to know how to work together, facing all the threats and all the conflicts which are opposing our stability and security in our region. That's what we are looking forward for.
Okay, thank you, Admiral. I stay with you just to launch another round of questions. There are a lot of questions about what is the main threats or the main concern in terms of security for your navies. And you spoke often about interoperability, alliance, or the way to work, to be not alone in face of such a threats or such uncertainty or just concern or in terms of security. What is your main concern, and how do you organize your cooperation with other navies, in what format, and so on?
Our concerns, as I said, Egypt has special occasions. It has the borders with the Red Sea and the Mediterranean Sea connected by the Suez Canal. So we have a special place in the world which have to be defended very well, because it will have results which will defend all the world. So we are our threats, of course, the tourism, the smuggling, the illegal immigration. That's our real threats about our borders, which are working very good to control it and defend against it. Besides, we are, like other navies, we have to get a good cooperation with other navies to advance our abilities. We are building that by the joint training with other navies, friend navies, with visits of the ships between our navies, to improve the training, the trust, and how we can learn each other and how we can talk with each other to get the most benefit we need to reach.
Your main partners are, who are the main partners in terms of interoperability and trade?
Most of the Mediterranean navies are friends of the Egyptian Navy, and they have maybe a yearly joint training with most of the navies. So this is a way to improve ourselves and get cooperation with our Dardanelles.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
For Italy.
Well, I could tell you that maybe the concern is the situation herself, and not to have the capability, not to have the possibility to achieve different capability in time. Because, as I said, the situation is evolving very, very rapidly. That's why we are pushing on some programs. The protection of depth infrastructure is one of them, and the other one is the carrier strike group, as I said. But the only way we do believe now to mitigate this is to increase, for sure, the cooperation with the other navies, which normally sail in Mediterranean or, let's say, NATO area of responsibility. But also, as I said, to increase, under a diplomatic point of view, the international relation with all the countries which are facing the Mediterranean. Because, I mean, there are different options that we have to offer to the decision maker, and one of them is also to maintain the situation as it is, or to better the situation through the international relation. Under the capacity perspective, as I said, there are some gaps. We are working with different nations, with the French Navy for sure, UK, US, because we believe that working together, it will be, for sure, the time will decrease in order to achieve this common capability.
Thank you. Et pour la marine espagnole, quelle menace, quel problème de sécurité?
And for the Spanish Navy, maybe I'll surprise you, but for me the biggest threat is that what's happening in the Mediterranean should be considered as serious. The threats in the Mediterranean, in principle, are not seen as existential threats. Everything happening east of Europe is seen as an existential threat, and insofar as this threat at the east of Europe does not reach the Mediterranean, well, our decision makers don't consider that the situation is critical in the Mediterranean. There's no threat. So for me, it's a big issue. The second threat is the budget, of course, because given what I just said, because the budget translates what decision makers understand or see as a threat. But there's a threat to the east that's also present in the Mediterranean, that is the Russian Navy. Is that an issue for the Spanish Navy? Well, no, I think. What is the threat, the Russian threat? It's not a great part of the Russian forces that is present. But, it's tricky, it's concerning, but I don't think that this part of the Russian fleet represents an existential threat, given the strength or the forces that we can deploy in the Mediterranean. If you see, as far as the Russian threat, in the Mediterranean there are many other threats, migrations, trafficking, which is not perceived in our countries as an existential threat. So it loses in importance compared to other threats. So I don't think we bring enough care to what's happening in the Mediterranean. And it's because what's happening are not existential threats for Europe in general, for the time being. But the future may prove us wrong. And in the seabed, for example, we may encounter difficulties. I think we have to be extremely vigilant on what can happen there. With the seabed, I suppose, cables and things. Fine. So I think the answer was answered, but I said in a moment where the tensions increase very strongly, the question of misunderstandings, the motion of a vessel, the route of a vessel can lead to a drift, an escalade. Other things also is in the Mediterranean, as I think we said that clearly. There's a concentration of the forces, of the stakes, and this offers, this represents potentially for adversaries a theater where you can go. If you take Ukraine, okay, take Ukraine for example. If you talk about the Ukrainian war, a way to go around the issue and to address a message to competitors elsewhere, you just you transpose the problem, and the Mediterranean can be a strategic place for that. So I think the misunderstanding between two forces, because of the high tension that can be degraded and give rise to going from a crisis to war, and so concentration of the forces is an ideal platform to show the will of a competitor in a conflict that can be transposed from another place to the Mediterranean. The commitments in Ukraine, in Ukraine, if you sink a ship, it's not considered as an attack on a territory, a national territory. So it's a cheap way for the person responsible for the actor. But there's also the instrumentalization of proxies, to which you give means, anti-vessel weapons to terrorist organizations, for example, anti-ship missiles, transport them in a surprising way, and eventually strike a warship of a riparian navy. Technically, is that possible for a rogue organization? How does a navy like yours prepare itself for that kind of an event that can just happen? But it's happened in the past. Truck equipped with a basic missile being sent on a corvette or on a vessel in the Eastern Mediterranean. It's a well-known scenario. Now, there are two responses here. First of all, self-protecting the vessels and the capacity to treat the missile threat, something on which all the navies have worked on, either with the hard kill anti-missile or soft kill systems, where we've made a lot of improvements in recent years. And so, but it's also the sword and the shield. And I talked about hypervelocity. There are some hypersonic missiles today that we need to be able to address. And we're working on this to try to bring the best response. And we're rather good for that. And the second axis, besides the self-protection, is to be informed, the capacity of knowing what's happening. So to observe what's happening, not always easy, but observing a truck that's driving on the coastal road, and you can observe what's happening with this truck. If they remove if they open it up and there's a missile, so then you can use drones to have an eye that goes and tries to anticipate the information on what's happening. You talk about missiles, sophisticated weapons. I think you have to think of suicide UAVs, much more probable, much easier to use, much easier to hide than a missile. Even selling highly sophisticated missiles, even if there's a black market, it's more difficult. As the Admiral said, it's all a question of being informed. You can be better respond if you know what to expect. Essential. It's really key. Be well informed, intelligence, to to know what you're faced with. We have the means because our navies, we have the high-level means, but this equipment, we need to have a good idea of what's happening, again, information, and we need to have a good level of preparedness because we can't always be informed or knowledgeable. There's a wide spectrum of threats, it's impossible to know everything. So intelligence is key. And I'm saying rather than very sophisticated means, be very careful. Be wary of UAVs, suicide drones, low level, low performance. I think the U.S. With a simple balloon, there was a big issue, something that are unexpected, a very low, unsophisticated system. So it's much more probable, even if the Hezbollah has already sent anti-vessel missiles on vessels. Any comments on this?
Is useful in this case because the best option is to prevent and also to shape the environment, to understand what's going on, and to be ready to react. Under an large-scale perspective, I guess that right now we do have the capability to react, but the prevention for sure is the best option.
Oui, merci. Je voudrais rebondir sur ce que...
I'd like to react on what you just said. I think that we may seem not to agree, but I think we agree. We have two issues to face with: the where and decision. How do you judge the adversary, and how do you win the battle, a decisive battle? When you want to wear out an adversary, you will use low spectrum means that will eat up its potential, that will bother him and force him to consume potential. That's what we see today in Ukraine with surface drones that are produced very rapidly and sent against the Russian fleet. So we are wearing out the potential. So it's a wearing out war. So for this kind of war, we need to be capable of having ourselves systems enabling us to wear out the adversary and be able to treat the wearing. It can be suicide UAVs, all kinds of UAVs, and attrition war. Yeah. So, but there's also the decisive battle, and in this case, it's a question of shield and sword, technological sword. You have to be able to respond to a more sophisticated attack. So we're faced with both cases, but some militia, as you mentioned, have used anti-vessel missiles, and we've seen things fly over the Red Sea coming from militias, and they're normally not part of the equipment of this lower part of the spectrum.
Et donc, je vous pose deux...
Yeah, well, one last round of questions, two questions in one, and just two conclusions. So there are many questions about the possible maritime alliances, naval alliance, NATO plus, how can we turn the Mediterranean Sea a sea that would be free from all external players, military speaking, very much what Iran wants to do with the Persian Gulf. Now, how do you see, and it is a political question, but is it possible to consider that we could organize some kind of a cooperation of riparian navies of part of the Mediterranean Sea in order to reinforce the regional security? Okay, this is a question that is worth being asked. And for the last round, could you briefly tell us what seems to be the priority of your Navy, the key topic, priority key as Chief of Staff of the Navy, Chief Admiral of your Navy today?
The navies of the Mediterranean to be combined under one role or one benefit we hope that, and we have to work for getting that, because it will give us many benefits and many good results. But I think it is difficult because the Mediterranean have a global issues. So the global issues will oppose that for every part have its own benefits. So it will be complicated with only the Mediterranean. If we can, it will be good, but I think it is difficult. The other thing is the benefit of the Egyptian Navy. Of course, as any other navy, is to defend our water and to defend the economic route which passes through the borders of Egypt, especially the Suez Canal. It affects the whole region and whole world. So this is our main benefits which are making it and sticking on it.
And that is the main concern for the,
of course,
for the Chief of Navy.
Of course, the Navy leads to economic trade. We are sticking in doing our role, which make use for all the region and for all the world.
Yeah.
Well, Italy is, we consider Italy a medium-sized regional power with a strong maritime connotation, which means that the purpose of our Navy would be to support the nation in order to achieve and protect the national interests wherever they are. And the key actions are referred for sure in the capacity, which means investment, which means programs, which also support the private industry and support the cooperation. But the other one is the personnel, which is one of the things we have to think about, because the life in the Navy is hard, is very hard, especially in this period with long deployment. So we have to think also about our personnel and try to increase our capability. And in terms of, I don't know if I get in the right way the questions, but if it is a possible maritime alliance, just the answer is that we had in the history coalition of the willings, which were, well beyond NATO, well beyond Europe, war in the Gulf, for instance. So everything is possible, but as I said, we are a means. Possible alliance with different countries depends on the governments. So we will act also as facilitator in order to achieve and guarantee a possible interoperability.
Thank you. Amiral.
To the first question, maritime alliance, well, there is a political answer which I cannot give, but what navies should do is a technical response. We need to understand all the time that there is only one way to train, one way to fight, and we are all in the south. So, we are all NATO, so we are all NATO. So from both sides of the southern countries function on this technical base. So it will be possible, but what we need are politicians to decide how to do it. But to the second part, I can tell you clearly that as a chief of staff, man inhabits the earth, not the sea. So what's important for the Navy is to be capable of influencing what goes on land. So all our capabilities, our purpose, our main purpose is to maintain capabilities which can influence what goes on land. Otherwise, our Navy will not be essential for the country. For the alliance, I think there are several alliances in the Med region. If we talk about, of course, about the NATO groups, naval groups, the European missions, be it by trilateral, quadrilateral formats, the 5+5 between North and South countries, and all they organize the discussion fora, which are essential. And then when we end up with a crisis, when we face a crisis, that we don't always activate the fora, but we all, thanks to the fora and the zones, the places where you find countries which can actually work together, because eventually we all face the same challenges in this closed space. All the riparian countries face the same problems. So, well, it's not one typical alliance. There will always a political will from several countries to act, and this will create a coalition that will come to work either within the framework of Europe or 5+5 or something else. So I think we can always work because we know one another well. As to the priority of the Navy, well, in France, we had a process of military planning law, which assigned us a budget, and we can increase capability. But I will agree with my Italian colleague, but human resources are essential because, as the Spanish colleague said, we don't live at sea, but the maritime environment is very abrasive, and it's not a normal environment for individuals. So we have to convince people that we face challenges. We have to go into it, ask them to join the Navy, stay in the Navy, they make progress in the Navy. We need to preserve the manpower, highly efficient as it exists today, in the long term. Gentlemen, thank you very much. I keep in mind a lot of things, but I have a couple of points from this exchange. First one is the commonalities of your visions. Well, navies, you are already active at peace. And, there are, the sea policing, environmental policing, vis-à-vis criminals, crisis management, the rise of low-intensity crisis, low signal, This is a full-time job, and you share that. And second point is this ability to work in ad hoc manners with riparian navy, whichever it is. There are three partners from NATO and European Union, and there is a partner which is outside the format, which works regularly and easily with all the navies, and which makes obsolete the issues of structuration, which are a bit theoretical of the tools, such as was said early on. And you all share this specificity such that your normal activity places you at a location where war will start, and you will change the world with the same instruments, the same crews, the same configurations, and this concrete aspect, you experience it in a specific way, and this is one of the strong ideas I found from your exchange. Thank you very much, and thank you.